Mark, thanks for joining us live on web.
You're welcome, Eugene. Thanks for having me here.
Tell us a little bit about what you do and your firm.
Th- What I do with the National Transportation Institute is I primarily focus on the private fleet driver data compensation packages. NTI was founded in 1995, and it was founded on putting together strong benchmarking for truck driver compensation. We work with a lot of for-hire fleets, a lot of private fleets, equity analysts, and anybody in the stock sector.
So, touch on that. Big data, that was a big topic of conversation at the conference in Nashville. What is the impact that big data is having on the industry?
Well, big data, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and that's really what the scope of the big data conversation was. There was a carrier that talked about big data and how they used it, and it ended up saving them about $500,000 annually because they were able to utilize big data and their systems to be able to manage what their pay increases or decreases were going to be, and they put it in a better perspective.
What is this big data and what does it entail, and how does these your subscribers, your clients, how do they read it? How do they
Well,
utilize it?
yeah. I mean, our data comes in formats, whether it's Excel format, for example, and as well as the long history that we have. We have been, again, since 1995, we have been gathering truck driver pay and pay packages since then. So for 21 years, we have a lot of history, and they're able to utilize that history very, very well. Uh, Even if it's current, we do have a lot of current information as well as the history, and that helps them put together packages that really puts them in position to know where they're at against their competition.
Are there trends that you can share with us in big data and how people are managing it, or just trends out there in the industry?
Yeah, the trends, the trends with a lot of the um, sectors, whether it's private fleets or for hire fleets, they're looking at various trends to help them really look at it, whether it's per diem or detention or incentives or bonuses. Those are the trends that we are seeing primarily with the big data.
Talk about your takeaway from the conference in Nashville. What kind of feedback that you get from people who were fortunate enough to enjoy your panel, and also your perspective and what you came away with from the conference.
Well, I came away with a lot, and I guess one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of are the inconsistencies with the schools, whether it's a carrier school or a school for truck drivers, or we call it a CDL mill, where they're just inconsistent with running the drivers in and not really preparing them for what the situation is. There was a lot of conversation on for hire fleets and their aging workforce, and how some of the for hire fleets may have to be nervous about that. And I'm not sure if that's really the proper take on that, only because uh, with a for hire driver, um, there's they don't necessarily like to do a lot of labor. Private fleets, there is a lot of labor with a private fleet, and that's really the take that I have is the schools and the private fleets are probably going to become more and more of partners, and with the millennials, um, we have to find a way to adapt better, and private fleets have adapted very, very well to a situation that merits a new millennial type driver to come into the system because they're home daily, they have shorter length of haul, and it's a little more physical. they have more physical labor. Now, the drivers that are aging on the private side, will they go to the for-hire fleets? Maybe. There certainly is a good notion that that could happen. So that is my take on that. And then and I think that along with that, the people that I've spoken to aren't necessarily talking about raising their driver wages. What they are looking at, though, is how do they manage it better? How do they compare themselves to the competition and just benchmark it better?
Okay. And then again, to circle back, that's where you come in and by providing the data, they're able to identify, how to best pursue that avenue.
Yeah, that's right, because one nationwide pay package doesn't work much anymore. The days of, all right, you're coming in at 39 cents a mile no matter where you live, those days are kind of over. And so you have to look at various markets, and we look at all of the markets throughout the industry. We call it our city-centric data, and it really provides a clear picture of that specific location. And you'll find that the East Coast for hire fleets pay a little bit more than the Midwest. The West Coast pays a little bit more than the Midwest for private fleets. So each type of business is just a little different.
And if we can wrap this up, Mark, tell me, with what we talked about and what your services and what you see out there, notwithstanding that, there's still this urgent call to get new drivers in there, and the industry is clamoring for the need for drivers. Is this something, give me your perspective. Is this something that is solvable? Where do you see the driver shortage situation 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Yeah, it's what is probably the most interesting, and if, as you did, attended our seminar, it showed that though there have been a lot of pay changes recently, they've only gotten back to the 2005 inflation rates.
Okay.
So though we've seen a lot of increases, they're really not that great. So pay has not kept up with inflation. So if we can look at that in a different way, then we can get more drivers attracted to it. The other part is, I feel, is the culture. With the aging workforce, kind of looking at retiring, and then you have the millennials coming in. We as industry have maybe not been fast enough to adapt to the millennials and what they want. I can recall a lot of scenarios when I was an operations manager for a large refrigerated carrier. The culture, internal culture, may not have been exactly what we needed to have in order to manage a millennial. It was, why are you doing this? And, well, this is what we have to do to make sure we retain the driver. So you kind of have to look at it differently to manage that culture internally, as well as what are you going to do to attract and retain that current driver that you have.
Mark, those are very excellent points, and thank you for sharing your insight and perspective live on web at Transport Topics.
You're very welcome, Eugene. Good seeing you again.
Likewise.